Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 23rd of January 2018. So coming to the first article, getting back on the democratic path, the opinion is that India gave itself a great system but now does not seem to know how to keep it up to standard. Now the context is that in the backdrop of the coming Republic Day, the editorial is an analysis of the functioning of the constitution and the democratic principles within the country. Largely, the article is a critique to the functioning of the constitution. So before we discuss, a disclaimer that whenever you are asked to analyze the constitutional functioning in the country, definitely some criticism is warranted, but the article should not be a single tone one, and you should bring about some advantages of that as well. However, the points that have been enumerated in this editorial are much relevant and they can be used as a valid criticism. So coming to the first analysis is with regards to the difficulty of governance in India. Now here the author brings about an analysis that governance in India is definitely challenging in the backdrop of several competing diversities, several rights and claims by the citizens in this country. So to ensure democracy in such a scenario is definitely difficult. But this difficulty should never be an excuse for poor governance in the country. And this needs to be compensated by a greater vision and judgment and balance and largeness by the political class of the country. So that is the analysis he has drawn, that there is a need to ensure reason in the political class and the political cadres to ensure efficient governance in the country, and the challenges are no excuse. So that is the first analysis. The second analysis is with regards to mutual conflicts. Now here the author talks about the partisan politics that is continuing in the country. Here the author brings about a good analysis where he says that some principles of the constitution should have been considered supreme, and politics on those ideals of the constitution should not have been welcomed in this country. But unfortunately that is not the scenario. For example, recently the fundamental right to expression has been questioned in the Padmavati row. Now all the political parties should have held this fundamental right of expression as supreme, and brickbatting on this issue of whether fundamental right of expression should be given or it should not be given, such kind of partisan politics is something that is very, very unfortunate in the country, and this is something that is the biggest challenge that has been faced by the country and the democratic principles of this country. So that is one analysis that the author has brought about. He says that all of this is going to result in dysfunctionality in the system, and it has led to a lot of divisive politics in the country. So that is one critique that the author has brought about here. Now the third point is with regards to comparison with other democracies. Yeah, so the author says with regards to other democracies, the author brings about an analysis that in the aftermath of independence, during that era where the decolonization took place, when India got its independence in the 1940s, a number of other countries also got independent, and democracy at that point of time was adopted by many countries, but it is only a few countries which could sustain democracy, and in a large number of other countries, democracy was replaced with authoritarianism. This even happened in several European countries. So this analysis is being drawn by the author that definitely India has some achievement to it, that India has continued to be a democracy, though there was a challenge to India's democracy in the backdrop of the emergency, where it was reflected that how easily democracy in this country can be compromised with. But India bounced back from that phase of emergency, and even today our democracy is much vibrant. So this is definitely a welcome precedence, but much more needs to be done in this regard, and the complete ideals of the constitution and democracy are something that are still a distant goal in India, and they need to be achieved. So that is one analysis. Now further the author talks about an elaboration on democracy, and he says that democracy has certain requirements. For example, it depends on certain enlightened ideals of liberty and equality, impartiality of law and institutions. However, in the current scenario, there is largely a focus on group obsessions, and this takes away from the national interest. Even as I mentioned previously in the Padmavat case, the focus is largely on the pride of the Rajputs, and this is even at the cost of undermining the national interest of the citizens, which is in the freedom of expression. So that is one analysis that the author has brought about here. Further, the author has given a very good analysis of China's case. Now, here the author says that China is often criticized for being an authoritarian country, and often it is said that its achievements are largely because it is an authoritarian country and it never faces the challenges that a democracy faces. But this is unacceptable. For example, a country like North Korea is also an authoritarian country. Several Arab countries were also authoritarian countries. Now, in all these countries, also development could not take place at the pace at which it has taken place in China. So, definitely, Chinese case is a unique one. Here the author brings about a fact that though China also has its internal challenges, China is also faced with corruption and other severities in China also exist. Crime is there in China. There is a suppression of rights in China. All of those issues do exist. But despite all of these internal challenges, there is a directing force which devises and executes forward-looking plans for national greatness in China. And it is this force, this direct force, which has led to the success of China. And it is this force which India needs to learn from, and it should implement this focus and this vision that Chinese leadership has had. So that is one analysis. Another thing with regards to China is that China, the author says, has twin role for India. First and foremost, it should act as a yardstick for India. India should compare its achievements vis-a-vis China. Also, China should act as a warning for India, because if China is rising in India's neighborhood, then definitely it is a warning symbol, and India needs to upgrade its policies and also keep pace with the Chinese progressiveness. So that is a very good analysis here. Now, I have mentioned this quote that has been used in the editorial. This quote is by Alexander Hamilton. It reads as, "A government must be fitted to a nation as much as a coat to the individual. What may be good at Philadelphia may be bad at Paris and ridiculous at Petersburg." Now, this quote is a key quote. I would suggest you can use this quote in your essays. You can use it in answers. So that's why I have mentioned it here. Now, the significance of this quote is of utmost importance. The significance is that governance should not be blindfolded. It should not be as a universal paint over the globe. Rather, it should be very, very specific to the country. So this analysis is being brought about even more now, because now the countries are moving towards nationalism as compared to globalism. So there also the spirit of this quote stays valid, that the best form of governance is a governance which is suited to the specific needs of the country. So this is what is being suggested here, and author is definitely calling for such kind of a governance in India. So that is one analysis here. Now, next aspect that has been discussed is with regards to the undermined institutions in India. Here the author has discussed that both that all the three branches of governance, that is the legislative, the executive, as well as the judiciary in India, are faced with specific challenges. For example, in the case of the executive, the political executive is largely self-seeking. The permanent executive, which is the bureaucracy, is dysfunctional, and the legislatures are already meeting very less, and whenever they are meeting, they are resorting to partisan politics and are often resulting in deadlocks in major legislation. So this is one problem definitely that India is facing. Also, with regards to judiciary is falling prey to its own nemesis. Judiciary, being a closed institution, has several challenges. Even recently we saw the press conference by the 4 judges which brought about the problems that judiciary is facing. So in such a scenario, in the aftermath of 70 years of independence and almost 68 years of the constitution, it is obvious that these major institutions are facing severe challenges in the country, and this is what has been analyzed by the author. Further, the author brings about an analysis with regards to the traditional backward thinking in the country. He says that until and unless the thinking in the country is backward and is largely guided by traditional influences, it is going to impact the reforms in the country, and it is going to push the country in the backward direction. So that is one analysis. He criticizes events like Khap Panchayat diktats. He criticizes dowry practices, untouchability, and patriarchy which continue in this country. So all of these are the critiques that the author has given to the functioning of democracy and constitution. Now he offers some solution. He says that what is needed is a planned and determined push to make our system work better and to modernize the system. Also, he says in this regard, the role of the leaders is what is important. He has given an analysis where he talks about the present government, but that is a political aspect which you need not focus upon. So what you need to conclude from here, that the role in this regard has to be taken by the leaders of the country, and it is only when the leaders will take a modernistic approach that the country can have its reforms. That is what is being advocated here. And for the citizenry, it is important that the citizenry pushes its leaders to take up this role. This is much more important for India in the modern times, because India is faced with several security threats and challenges, especially in the backdrop of a rising China. So that is an analysis that has been given in this editorial. The editorial is important. It can be used in essays. The critiques that the author has brought about are much acceptable and relevant. So that is the importance of this article. Coming to the next article, the perilous march of Hindustan. The opinion here is that the project to replace English with Hindi and other languages is reaching an inflection point. Now, the context of this article is that recently the government had proposed to make Hindi an official language at the UN. So that is one analysis here. Another aspect of the context is that last year the Karnataka Chief Minister called for removing Hindi signage at Bangalore metro station. So the issue related to language in this country has been silent for a long time. Since almost 1970s, it has been a suppressed one. But recently we are seeing that this matter is gaining attention again. So that is the context of this editorial. Now, before we begin, we need to understand some background related to the question of languages in the country. First and foremost, you need to understand that India is a country of vast number of languages. There are a number of almost thousands of languages that are spoken in this country. Amongst these languages, there are 22 official languages which are included in the 8th schedule of the Constitution. Now, before that, some facts that as per the 2011 census, the number of speakers of each language is something that you should know. First is that English language is the most spoken. This is followed by the Hindi language. This is followed by Bengali, then Telugu, Marathi and Tamil. So these are the 6 languages in order of being spoken. This can be asked even in your prelims. So that is the importance here. Now, coming to the third aspect of the constitutional provision, the Constitution has an 8th schedule which has 22 official languages. Now, when a language is given the status of being an official language, the language immediately gets represented at the Official Languages Commission in India. Further, this language can be used to write public service exams like the UPSC. And also some facts that the 3 latest added languages were in the year 2003. When Bodo, Dogri, Maithili and Santali were added to the 8th schedule of the Constitution. So this is one important aspect. Now, coming to some constitutional provisions with regards to the languages in the country. First and foremost is Article 343 of the Constitution. This article talks about the official language of the Union. And as per this, Hindi is going to be the official language of the Union. And English shall continue as the language of the Union. It was supposed to continue as the language of the Union for 15 years. This was at the time when the Constitution was made in the year 1950. Now, some background you need to understand here is that in 1950, the primary language in the country was English. Why? Because India had got its independence from British, and for them, English language was the official language. Even the Constitution of India had been written initially in the English language. So you have to understand that what was the prevalence of the English language. So English language couldn't immediately be done away with. So that is one issue, that the Article 343 acknowledged English also as the official language for 15 years. Then there is an Article 344 which calls upon the President to set up an official language commission. So this is one requirement as per this article, that the President should set up an official language commission. Now, as per the Constitution which was made in the year 1950, it was called that the official language commission should first be constituted in the year 1955. That is 5 years after the Constitution, and then after that 10 years in the aftermath of 1955, that is in 1965. So this commission has been constituted in the year 1955 and 1965, and it was in the aftermath of the reports of this constitution that a lot of controversies did come up. We'll see them here in this aspect. So this is the role of Article 344. Then Article 345 talks about the official languages of the states. Then Article 346 talks about the official languages for communication between one state to another state, or between the state and the union. So these are the important articles. Also, Article 348 is important because this talks about the language that is to be used by the Supreme Court and the High Court. So these are some constitutional provisions with regards to use of official language. So that is the part here. Now, coming to some controversies with regards to languages in the country. First and foremost, you need to understand that India being a diverse country, language related issues were definitely supposed to have arisen, and controversies in this regard have time and again erupted in the country. So that is one analysis. Now, what happened at the time of independence? First and foremost, as I told you, English was a predominant language, but the leaders of the country decided that they will not keep English as an official language, and they were seeking for another official language to replace English. An obvious choice that erupted at that time was the Hindustani language. This was the language which had contributions from the Persian and Urdu language, and this was the primary language after English, which was even used during the British administration. Now, it was decided that Hindustani should be the official language, but in the backdrop of the partition, there was a rise of right-wing extremism in the country, and they objected to using Urdu as one of the languages, and so Hindustani was discarded. Now, once Hindustani was discarded, a question again arose as to what should be the official language. In that scenario, Hindi was chosen. Why? Not because Hindi was a very developed language or it had a lot of text to it, not because of that reason, but because Hindi was the second most spoken language in the country. Like even today, English is the most spoken and the second is Hindi. So from that perspective, the leaders thought that Hindi would be a good choice for an official language. And in that backdrop, they made the Article 343, where Hindi was declared as the official language and English would continue for 15 years. Then in the year 1956, the controversy arose when, as I told you, that the Official Language Commission, which was set up in 1955, gave its report in the year 1956. In this report, the Official Language Commission asserted that it is time that the country should do away with English language and it should only make Hindi the official language. Now, this was something of a preponing of making Hindi the official language, despite the fact that the 15-year term that was given was not yet completed. This was seen by various South Indian states as an encroachment of their sovereignty, and they thought that it was an intention by the government to ensure homogeneity, and they considered it as a threat to their cultural heritage and the language heritage. So this led to a huge controversy then. This was followed in 1960 by the presidential order with regards to this controversy. In 1960, the president issued an order where he said that definitely Hindi should be promoted as the official language, but English language will continue to be an interim official language. So that was what the president said. Then in the year 1963, under Prime Minister Nehru, an official language act came by the parliament. Here again it was reiterated that Hindi should be made the official language and English may continue to be the official language. Now this word may was something that was ambiguous, and this was objected to by many South Indian states. They said that this was something that the central government was playing with, and it was a major challenge as in the future any time Hindi could be made the official language for the entire country. So they called for a constitutional amendment in this regard, and they said that this time limit of 15 years should be done away with and English should also be recognized as an official language. So this is one analysis. This was followed by the year 1964 when Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru died and Lal Bahadur Shastri became the new Prime Minister of India. Now, Lal Bahadur Shastri had a greater influence of Hindi language and he promoted Hindi language in the government. A number of reports were made in Hindi, a number of official documents were written in Hindi. So this again created fears in the minds of the people who were objecting to the declaration of Hindi as the official language. Then came the year 1965. In this year, there was an India-Pakistan war, as a result of which the matter got subdued for some time. But as I mentioned, that the year 1965 was also the year when the new official language commission was again to be constituted by the president. So again, the fears amongst the people rose and there were again a lot of controversy regarding this. This was followed by the year 1966 where Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri died and a new Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, came into form, and it was under Mrs. Indira Gandhi that her strong commitment was to resolve this language issue in the country. She visited a number of South Indian states and had held meetings with them, and in a final solution, she came up with this idea of a three-language policy, which was first mooted in the year 1967 and came into implementation in the year 1968. So what was this three-language formula? This three-language formula divided India into two regions. One was the Hindi-speaking region, which was the northern India largely, and the second region was the non-Hindi speaking region. Now, the formula advocated that in the Hindi speaking region, there should be three languages which should be taught. One will be Hindi, the second will be English, and the other will be a non-Hindi, non-English, some other language. And this other language should, as per this formula, it was advocated that this other language should be some Dravidian language to ensure greater harmony in the country. And for the non-Hindi speaking states, also it was advocated that they will speak their mother tongue, they will learn English, and they will learn Hindi compulsorily. So this was something that was an acceptable solution to all the stakeholders. And this is in the aftermath of 1967, the question of language somehow subdued. Until now, so the issues which have been arising in the modern context are, and regarding to this editorial also, first and foremost is with regards to ineffective implementation. Now, there are several challenges that the three-language formula has not been effectively implemented, more so in the northern states where no focus has been given on teaching the Dravidian languages to the northern states. So that is one criticism to it. And the non-Hindi speaking states have seen that the excessive focus of the government on Hindi is largely somehow, they fear it as a step of homogenization of Indian culture. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that the editorial largely talks about the Committee of Parliament on Official Language. It criticizes the actions of the Committee of Parliament on Official Language. Now, under Article 344, there was not only the provision of Official Language Commission, but there was also a provision for setting up a Committee of the Parliament on Official Language. And it was this committee in the year 2011 which first called for making Hindi the official language at the UN. So that is one criticism. Another aspect is that this committee has often criticized English and has adversely favored Hindi. This is one criticism against this committee. For example, this committee had given a proposal that in the ACR report of officers, there should be a column which rates them on the basis of their fluency in the Hindi language. So that is one criticism. Further, it often favors usage of Hindi newspapers and Hindi magazines. So these kind of steps taken by this commission, this committee of the parliament, these kind of suggestions are something that are unwelcome in this country. This is what has been analyzed in the editorial. Further, the editorial talks about the role of the English language. Here, he says that the English language is not only a global language, it has a role globally because it is the most spoken language globally. And it is one of, in various countries, definitely it's not the most spoken language, but in a number of countries, English language has a great advantage. So that is its role on global fora like the UN also. Also, he says that English language has had a great role to play even in India, for it has acted as a link language when, especially at a time when a lot of controversy was going on over an official language. Not only that, this has acted as a glue for India. So English language has played a very important role and it should not be completely done away with. So that is the analysis that has been drawn in the editorial. Further, the author talks about the cultural and literary heritage of the citizens in this country. Now, many languages like the Tamil are older than Hindi language and they have a text much more elaborate than the Hindi language. So in such a scenario, if we are going to force the citizens to adopt Hindi as their official language, definitely it is going to lead to a lot of controversy and criticism as people will see it as a threat on their cultural and literary heritage. So that is one analysis. Another important aspect that has been discussed in the editorial is with regards to Hindi versus Hinduism. Here the author brings about an analysis that often Hindi and Hinduism is equated. This is not the scenario. For example, a Marathi Hindu cannot speak Hindi. So such kind of diversity should be acknowledged, and this vendetta, this political vendetta where Hindi is being equated with Hinduism is something that is untrue and unacceptable, and this should be done away with. So this is what the entire editorial is about. This question of language is very much important because this is arising again and again in the current times, and this is happening after a long time. So a question can directly come in this regard. Also from the context of post-independence history, this topic is important. So this is the importance of this editorial. Now coming to the next topic, the color of inequity. The opinion is that the government should rethink its decision to issue orange passports for those requiring immigration checks. Now, the context is that the orange passport for immigration check required citizen is something that has been mooted by the government. Now, before we get into an understanding some background on this topic, now you need to understand that how did this idea originate? Now, this originated from an entirely different perspective. For there were some sections of women and children who were objecting to the name of the spouse or father that they needed to mention on their passports. Like single mothers were objecting to it, adopted children were objecting to it. So in this respect, the Ministry of External Affairs decided that it will no longer print anything on the back page of the passport, and the back page of the passport will be left blank. Now, previously, this back page of the passport was used for a stamp, which was for the immigration check required. Now, in the backdrop of the fact that this page is not going to exist and it will become a blank page, in that context, the government came up with the idea that for people who require who need this certification of an immigration check required, their passports will be of a different color, which will be the orange color. Now, what are the issues related to this? First and foremost, it is an issue of discrimination. Now, this idea of immigration check required citizens is that these are the citizens who are largely those citizens who have not passed their matriculation exam, as well as they are not income tax payers. So largely they are considered as vulnerable citizens, and they being unskilled, these citizens are largely immigrating to Gulf countries, and in these countries there are certain protections that these citizens require. They require some additional counseling by the authorities. So in that regard, this stamp was issued on their passports, and they were provided with these extra services which they needed. But if they are going to have a different colored passport, then this will be an exposure of these citizens, and this will result in a discrimination against this citizen, for they can be made to feel low because of their vulnerabilities, that is that they do not have a matriculation degree, or they are probably of a comparatively poorer background. So this is the issue here. Another thing is that with regards to the noble motive. Now, as I previously also explained in the background, that the motive was to bring about this orange passports was basically a noble one. First and foremost, it wanted to protect the rights of single mothers and children who are adopted and did not want to take the names of their fathers in their passport. So definitely it has a noble motive from that aspect. Also, the idea of ECR is a noble one because it wants to provide protection to this vulnerable group. But the means by which the government is trying to do it is something that is unacceptable. So this is a classic example of the means versus end debate. So it can be used in your ethics paper also. Further, it is a reflection of the failure of the state. Now, it is a failure of the state because the state has failed to fulfill its responsibility towards all its citizens. The state has given a fundamental right to its citizen of equality of status and opportunity. Also, in the preamble, the state talks about socialistic principles. So, if a section of India is being forced to fall under the ambit of the orange passport, that is a section of the country of the citizens are not educated aptly, or they are vulnerable, they are poor. So in such a scenario, it is not a failure of the citizens, rather it is a failure of the state. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that this will result in a stigma associated with the orange passport, and it can even act as a deterrent for many people to even apply for passports. So this is one case. Another issue is that some other examples of such kind of cases. For example, such passports were issued in Germany to Jews, where the passport clearly read as a big J on the passport. Also in South Africa, such special passports were issued to the blacks in the country during the era of apartheid. So all of these examples are largely where rights of the citizens have been stamped upon. So this is something that is unacceptable in a modern democracy and unacceptable in today's era. So that is one analysis. Further, the author talks about the democratic principles of the country, and he says that in India's democracy there is no space for creating a divide on the basis of economic or social capital. So definitely this is something that is an unacceptable step by the government, and the government does need to give up its ideas of bringing about the this concept of orange passport. So that is what is the analysis that has been given here. Coming to the next article, towards an end game. This is largely about Turkey, which is the opinion here, as I'll read it out. Turkey makes a decisive move against Kurdish fighters on the border with Syria. So some background related to this topic is what is important, though you need not get into many details, but some analysis is important because this is a scenario in the West Asia, and for West Asia peace, it is important for you to know some aspects. Now, first and foremost, this is Syria, the country that is visible in white, and this shares a long border with Turkey. Now, the Syrian region can be divided into three parts. The first part would be this. This is the territory which is largely dominated by the Kurds, and this was previously the region where the Islamic State was dominant. Then the second part of Syria that can be divided is along the Mediterranean Sea. This is the Syrian regime. This is where the President Bashar al-Assad is in dominance. Then this is the region of Syria where the opposers to this regime are active. This is with the support of this is where Russia is attacking. Russian attacks are predominant in this region, as this is the region where belligerents to the Syrian regime are dominating. So these are the three regions in Syria. Now, what is important in this editorial is this particular region. Now, you need to understand that to do away with the Islamic State, to defeat the Islamic State, the US took help of the Kurdish fighters, because the US was only providing aerial support, and it did need armies for fighting the Islamic State on the ground. So they started backing the Kurdish fighters. They even provided them with arms and ammunition. And now when the Islamic State has been wiped off, it is Turkey who is fearing the rise of the Kurdish militants here, because they are responsible for terrorism in Turkey. Not only that, the Kurds have an ambition of ensuring this region as Kurdistan. They want a separate country. So this will take share of Turkey, which Turkey is unwilling to part with. So that is one issue which is there, which is of importance in the West Asian region, which is impacting the stability of West Asia. Turkey has decided to attack the Kurdish forces here. Another aspect which is important is that the US initially was planning to make the Kurdish forces as an official militia in this region. The US has now denied to that, and the US has asserted that it will support Turkey. So there is a case of abandonment by US in this region. So definitely there's a lot of instability in this region. This is all what you need to understand, that why is this instability and why is Turkey against the Kurdish region in Syria. So, and also the issue is going to propel into a ripening of a further deepening of the civil war in Syria. So that is one analysis that is important with regards to this particular editorial. So before we end, some piece of information. We are starting a UPSC prelims cum main classes from January 21st of January 2018, and we shall be covering all basics, which shall include the NCERT daily newspaper, prelims, test series and mains answer writing. So all interested candidates, please do get in touch with us. These are our contact details and this is our phone number. So with this, I finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching and I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.